Blindsided by the rival. Scene 1. The sales floor warfare. $80,000 in premium server infrastructure closed and signed. Boom. That, my friends, is how you handle a client. I slammed my folder onto the edge of the glass partition, flashing my signature dazzling smile to the entire department. I was Sebastian Thorne, 25 years old, blessed with naturally wavy blonde hair that always looked perfectly styled, expressive blue eyes, and a charisma that could convince a fish to buy water. I was the undisputed king of the floor, the golden boy, the top closer. Until 2 months ago. From the corner cubicle, the temperature in the room instantly dropped to freezing. Sitting behind a mathematically organized desk, surrounded by flawless, color-coded metric charts, was Adrian Vance. Adrian was 24, a newly hired senior account executive, and a walking, breathing human glacier. He was devastatingly handsome in a severe, intimidating way. Midnight black hair parted with military precision, sharp pale grey eyes behind thin black-rimmed glasses, and a posture so rigid you'd think his tailored three-piece suit was made of titanium. He never laughed. He never participated in office gossip. And worst of all, he was an absolute genius. "Your closure numbers are technically adequate, Thorne," Adrian spoke, his voice a smooth, low, and terrifyingly calm baritone that cut right through my celebratory noise. He didn't even look up from his screen. "However, if you analyze your variance report, your post-sale client retention rate dropped by 4%. You charm them into a quick contract, but your lack of structural follow-up leaves money on the table. It's unoptimized. It's sloppy." My smile twitched. I felt a hot vein pop in my forehead. Sloppy. Vance, I just brought in the biggest revenue of the week. My clients love me. They buy because they trust my vision, not because of a dry spreadsheet. Adrian slowly raised his head, his sharp grey eyes locking onto mine through his glasses. His face was an emotionless mask. "Clients buy because of market necessity, Sebastian. Charisma is merely a temporary substitute for actual data. Enjoy your fleeting lead. The quarterly review is next Friday." Internal monologue. I hate him. I absolutely, deeply, fundamentally despise him. He's been here for 60 days and he's already neck and neck with me for the annual chairman's bonus. He thinks he can look down on my hard work just because he breathes Excel files. I am open about being gay outside these walls, but in this office, my only sexuality is destroying Adrian Vance's career metrics. Scene 2. The blind date setup. 7:30 p.m. I was sitting at a corner booth in the chic velvet lounge downtown, practically slumped in exhaustion. My best friend, Marcus, was sitting across from me, sipping his cocktail. "I'm telling you, Marcus, he's a robot," I groaned, running a hand through my blonde hair. "He doesn't eat food, he consumes data. I need a distraction before I lose my mind and throw a stapler at him." Marcus laughed, leaning forward with a conspiratorial grin. "Which is exactly why I set you up tonight. You've been single for a year, completely buried in this office war. It's time to remember you have a life outside of sales targets." I sighed, just in the collar of my dark blue button-down shirt. "Are you sure about this guy?" "You know my type. I need someone intelligent, funny, and most importantly, someone who does not work in corporate technology." "He's perfect for you," Marcus insisted, checking his watch and standing up. "He's an open gay guy, highly successful, sharp-witted, and he's looking for something real. He's supposed to arrive in 5 minutes. He'll be wearing a long black coat and holding a silver pocket watch on the table so you can recognize him. I'm leaving now so it's not awkward. Have fun, Sebastian." "Marcus, wait." I called out, but he just waved and vanished out the front door. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my shirt. My palms were suddenly sweating from pure, romantic anticipation. A blind date. It was old school, exciting, and exactly what I needed to wash the taste of the office out of my mouth. 5 minutes passed. The brass bell above the lounge door chimed softly. I whipped my head around, a bright, eager, and charming smile instantly forming on my lips as my eyes scanned the entrance. A tall man in a long black wool coat stepped inside, shaking the raindrops from his shoulders. He moved with an absolute, rigid elegance that felt terrifyingly familiar. He reached up with long, pale fingers, adjusting a pair of thin black-rimmed glasses on his sharp, sculpted nose. His midnight black hair was perfectly parted. My smile froze on my face. The air was violently sucked out of my lungs. No way. The man marched straight toward my corner booth, his grey eyes scanning the tables. With absolute precision, he pulled a vintage silver pocket watch from his coat, placed it gently on the wooden table, and slid into the booth right across from me. Adrian Vance. He locked his pale grey eyes onto mine. In a fraction of a second, his usual emotionless mask completely shattered. His eyes widened in profound, unadulterated shock. His sharp jaw tightened so hard I heard his teeth click. Thorn? Adrian rasped, his low baritone voice cracking slightly, completely stripped of its usual corporate control. Vance, I shrieked, slamming my hands onto the table, nearly knocking over my water glass. What the hell are you doing here? Are you stalking me now? Stalking you? Adrian sneered, his shock instantly turning into a cold, furious glare as he clenched his fists. My friend Julian told me he was setting me up with a charismatic, successful professional. He neglected to mention he was sending me a loud, hyperactive blonde nightmare who doesn't know how to format a basic pivot table. A nightmare? I gasped, my face burning with a mixture of rage and absolute humiliation. Marcus told me I was meeting a sharp-witted gentleman. You're not a gentleman, you're a human refrigerator. I can't believe my blind date is the most arrogant, irritating bastard in the entire city. Adrian stood up abruptly, grabbing his silver pocket watch and throwing his black coat over his shoulder. This meeting is an absolute waste of my temporal resources. Good evening, Sebastian. Sit down, Vance, I hissed, grabbing the edge of his coat before he could step away. The lounge was quiet, and several patrons were already looking at us. If you storm out right now, Marcus and Julian are going to ask questions. They are dating each other. If they find out we work together and had a massive blowout, our office life will become a public circus. Sit down. Adrian froze. He looked at my hand on his coat, then around the room, his analytical brain quickly realizing the corporate liability. With a slow, deep, and deeply resentful breath, he slid back onto the leather cushion. Fine, Adrian whispered, his grey eyes burning holes into mine. We stay for exactly 20 minutes to satisfy protocol. We do not speak of the office. And tomorrow, we pretend this disaster never occurred. Agreed, I glared back, leaning forward. 20 minutes. And if you use the word optimized once, I'm throwing this breadbasket at your perfect face. Scene 5. The cabin fever. Of all the cars in the company pool, you had to pick the one with a failing transmission, Burke. Vincent's cold, razor-sharp voice sliced through the cramped interior of the sedan. He was sitting in the passenger seat, his long legs uncomfortably cramped, his immaculate charcoal suit jacket neatly unbuttoned. He hadn't taken off his black-rimmed glasses once during the 4-hour drive, his pale grey eyes fixed firmly on a digital map glowing on his tablet. Oh, I'm sorry, Gail. Next time I'll magically summon a luxury limousine just to satisfy your royal highness. I snapped back, tightly gripping the steering wheel as the car shuddered violently against a massive gust of wind. The blonde waves of my hair were messy, my tie loosened at the collar. The weather report didn't predict a literal flash flood. I am doing my absolute best to keep us alive. Your best is statistically terrifying, Vincent retorted deadpan, not even glancing at me. If you had analyzed the meteorological variance charts I forwarded to your inbox at 5:00 a.m., you would have known the Eastern Highway was high risk. But as usual, you relied on intuition instead of data. Intuition got us a $70,000 contract on Tuesday, Vincent. I yelled over the roaring thunder outside. It got you a contract that our legal team spent 12 hours restructuring due to sloppy terms, Tristan. He countered smoothly, his low baritone voice carrying that maddening, clinical calm. Oh, great! Brilliant! Fantastic! I shrieked, frantically steering the dying car onto the muddy shoulder of the dark, isolated country road. The engine sputtered and died completely, leaving us in absolute silence, save for the torrential rain hammering the roof. Vincent slowly turned his head toward me, his grey eyes piercing through the dim light. Optimization status: 0. We are officially stranded in the middle of a localized temporal delay. What is your spontaneous vision for this scenario, Burke? I slammed my forehead onto the steering wheel with a dramatic groan. My vision is to lock you in the trunk and walk to the nearest town. Scene 6. Room 104. We have exactly one room left, boys. Take it, or sleep in the rain. The elderly motel receptionist had told us 10 minutes ago. And now, here we were, inside room 104 of the Whispering Pines Motel. A dreary, outdated roadside stop that looked like it hadn't been renovated since 1985. The wallpaper was a fading floral pattern, a small television sat in the corner, and right in the center of the room, mocking our misery, was a single, solitary queen-sized bed. Vincent stood by the door, holding his sleek leather briefcase as if it were a shield against the tacky environment. His jaw was clenched so tightly, I could see the sharp muscles pulsing. "I am sleeping on the floor," Vincent stated firmly, his corporate tone returning with a vengeance. "Gail, the floor is literally covered in green shag carpet that smells like old basement," I said, throwing my wet blazer onto the single wooden chair. I collapsed onto the edge of the mattress, kicking off my muddy leather shoes. "Look, we are adults. We are professional rivals. And after the disastrous blind date last night, we already know we can survive 20 minutes without killing each other. We just stay on our respective sides. No touching, no talking about sales metrics, no spreadsheets." Vincent stared at the bed through his glasses, his analytical brain processing the lack of viable options. With a heavy, deeply resentful sigh, he shed his long black coat, carefully folding it over the back of the chair. He unbuttoned the top button of his white shirt, exposing the sharp, elegant line of his collarbone. Without his armored suit jacket, he looked dangerously handsome and infuriatingly human. He slid into the far left side of the bed, lying perfectly straight, his arms crossed over his chest like a statue draped in silk. The silence stretching between us in the dim light of the bedside lamp was heavy, thick with a strange, suffocating awareness. Just 24 hours ago, we were supposed to be meeting our ideal virtual matches. I was supposed to be laughing with a witty stranger, and he was supposed to be analyzing a successful professional. "Vincent," I whispered into the quiet room, staring at the ceiling. "What, Tristan?" he murmured back, his voice incredibly low in the dark. "Why did you actually agree to go on that blind date? You always act like people are just numbers. Why look for a relationship?" A long pause followed. I thought he was going to ignore me, or give me a deadpan corporate dismissal. But as the rain pattered softly against the motel window, Vincent's rigid posture relaxed just a fraction. "Because numbers don't lie to you, Tristan," Vincent said quietly, his voice losing its robotic, clinical edge, replaced by a raw, hidden vulnerability. "At my old firm, I trusted someone, my partner. I thought we were building a future. But he used my access codes to steal a client database, framed me for the leak, and walked away with a promotion. I learned the hard way that letting your guard down is a liability. Being cold, being perfect, it's the only thing that keeps me safe." My heart did a painful, violent flip. I turned onto my side, looking at his sharp profile in the dim amber light. The arrogant, frustrating Ice King from the office suddenly looked so incredibly guarded, hiding behind his spreadsheets because he was terrified of being broken again. "I'm sorry," I whispered sincerely, my usual loud, hyperactive energy melting away into a soft, passionate warmth. "But for what it's worth, Vincent, I close deals fast because I genuinely care about people. I don't use data to manipulate, and I would never use your trust against you. You don't have to carry that shield around me." Vincent froze. His gray eyes slowly turned to look at mine, his gaze intense, searching my face for any hint of deceit. For 3 long seconds, neither of us breathed. The space between us on the bed felt entirely too small. "Go to sleep, Tristan," Vincent whispered softly, though his tone was no longer cold. It was remarkably gentle. "We have a $3 million contract to win tomorrow." Scene 7. The Apex Pitch. "Your proposal is thorough, Mr. Gale. But frankly, I find 200 pages of technical audits incredibly tedious." Director Harrison, the eccentric, notoriously unpredictable head of Apex Global, leaned back in his plush leather chair, tossing Vincent's massive binder onto the table with a dismissive sigh. Vincent's jaw tightened behind his black-rimmed glasses. I could feel the immediate spike of tension radiating from his shoulders. His clinical data method was failing. It was time for the golden boy to step in. Director Harrison, I completely agree. I laughed smoothly, sliding my own sleek digital tablet across the glass table, flashing my most dazzling, charismatic smile. I leaned in closer, making direct, intense eye contact with the older man. Why get buried in numbers when we can talk about the future? Your company isn't just data, it's a living, breathing vision. Let's talk about how our infrastructure can make your leadership legendary. Over a luxury dinner tonight, perhaps. My treat. Director Harrison's eyes lit up, a wide, predatory grin forming on his face. He leaned forward, completely ignoring Vincent, his gaze locking onto me with entirely too much interest. He reached over, his hand casually resting over mine on the table, giving it a suggestive squeeze.
Now that is the kind of partnership I value, Tristan. You have a spectacular way of looking at things.
Tell me more about this. Personal bond over dinner.
Internal monologue.
Gross. He's totally hitting on me. But a $3 million contract is on the line. I just have to smile, play along, and close the deal.
Director Harrison.
The temperature in the boardroom plummeted to absolute zero. Vincent stood up slowly, his tall frame looming over the table. His pale grey eyes were flashing with a dangerous, lethal rage behind his lenses. He wasn't just annoyed. He was completely consumed by a savage, icy jealousy that shocked me to my core. Mr. Burke's personal time is not included in our corporate asset distribution, Vincent spoke, his baritone voice carrying a terrifying, unyielding stillness that silenced the room. He stepped directly between me and the director, physically breaking Harrison's grip on my hand. Our company provides technical excellence, not entertainment. If your investment decisions are based on emotional manipulation rather than our 0% downtime guarantee, then Apex Global is suboptimal for our portfolio. Tristan, pack the files. We are leaving. I gaped at him, my mouth wide open. Did the Ice King just walk away from a $3 million deal because another man touched my hand? Director Harrison blinked in utter shock, completely intimidated by Vincent's raw alpha authority. Wait, Mr. Gale, let's not be hasty. Your data migration plan actually is quite impressive. If we combine your structural security with Tristan's vision, we can sign the contract right now. 30 minutes. In my office. Vincent didn't relax. He kept his body firmly positioned in front of mine, his grey eyes burning holes into Harrison. Flawless terms only. No dinners, no handshakes. Agreed. Harrison stammered, frantically calling his legal assistants inside. I leaned back against the wall, my face burning a deep, joyous crimson as I watched Vincent confidently dictate the final clauses of the contract. The cold, mechanical rival who claimed charisma was a myth had just destroyed a boardroom out of pure, possessive, protective instinct. And right then, I realized I was completely, hopelessly in love with him. Cine, the breach of protocol. 9:00 p.m. The contract was signed. The $3 million deal was officially secured. We were sitting at a private booth in the hotel's top floor lounge, 2 glasses of expensive bourbon sitting between us on the dark marble table. Vincent had finally taken off his black-rimmed glasses, placing them neatly next to his drink, his dark hair slightly rumpled. You walked away from the deal, Vincent, I said softly, a teasing smile playing on my lips as I looked across the table. You broke the ultimate corporate protocol. You insulted the client. What happened to optimization? Vincent picked up his glass, taking a slow, deep sip, his eyes avoiding mine. The client's behavior was a liability, Tristan. He was attempting to leverage your professional position for personal gratification. It was highly unoptimized. You were jealous, I whispered, leaning over the table, my blue eyes bright with a sudden, intense seriousness that made his fingers freeze around his glass. You hated that he touched my hand. Vincent paused, the silence stretching between us like a physical cord. Slowly, he set his glass down, his pale grey eyes locking onto mine with an uncharacteristic, raw intensity that sent a wild shiver straight down my spine. Yes, Vincent whispered, his deep baritone stripping away every single layer of his corporate shield. I hated it. I spent 2 months convincing myself that you were just a loud, irritating obstacle to my career, Tristan. But after last night, after hearing you say you would protect my trust, The thought of anyone else holding your attention makes my entire system malfunction. He reached across the small table, his long, pale fingers gently wrapping around my hand, squeezing it with an absolute, burning warmth. My heart hammered violently against my ribs, a breathless, ecstatic laugh escaping my lips. I flipped my hand over, intertwining our fingers tightly. The protocol is officially broken, Gale. Permanently, Vincent murmured, a rare, breathtakingly beautiful smile finally breaking through his icy exterior, lighting up his handsome face as he pulled me closer in the quiet dark. Scene 9. The corporate sabotage. We returned from the road trip victorious, a $3 million signed contract with Apex Global in my leather binder. By all corporate logic, Vincent and I should have been celebrated as the ultimate closing team. But the corporate world is a nest of vipers. Tristan Burke, Vincent Gale, my office, immediately. The vice president's voice boomed through the intercom, cold and unyielding. I shot a worried glance across the partition at Vincent. He had already put his black-rimmed glasses back on, his face returning to that familiar, unreadable Ice King mask. But as he stood up, his fingers tightly gripped a silver pocket watch, a telltale sign of internal calculations. We marched into the executive boardroom. Standing near the VP was Marcus, our envious colleague from the legal department, holding a thick folder with a malicious grin on his face. Care to explain this, Gale? The VP demanded, throwing a printed security log onto the glass table. Marcus has just brought forward evidence that right before you left for the Apex Global pitch, an encrypted data transfer was initiated from your terminal. Someone leaked our private pricing structures to our biggest competitor, Genesis Tech. The digital footprint points directly to your login credentials. My blood ran cold. I whipped my head to look at Vincent. He stood perfectly rigid, but his face had turned an ashen pale, the ghosts of his past, the betrayal at his old firm where he was framed for a data leak, were staring him right in the face again. The data is a fabrication, Vincent spoke, his voice dropping into that absolute, deadpan, and lifeless machine drone. I did not access the server core on Tuesday evening.
My login logs show.
Your login logs show an automated override. Vincent! Marcus sneered, stepping forward. You're a genius, aren't you? You thought you could hide the transaction behind a scheduled task. Mr. Vice President, Vincent Gale did this at his previous job, and he's doing it again here.
He's a corporate spy. He needs to be fired, blacklisted, and prosecuted.
I will submit my immediate resignation, Vincent whispered, his voice completely flat, hollow, and broken. He reached up, his fingers trembling slightly as he prepared to take off his glasses. Tristan had nothing to do with this contract. The Apex Global deal is secure. I will take full liability. No, you damn well won't, I shouted, my voice bouncing off the boardroom walls as my hyperactive energy turned into pure protective fury. I stepped directly in front of Vincent, slamming my hands onto the table. Mr. Vice President, this is an absolute joke. Vincent is a genius, yes, but he's too mathematically perfect to leave a sloppy digital footprint like this. Someone framed him because they wanted to steal the chairman's bonus.
Tristan, stop, Vincent murmured behind me, his hand catching my shoulder, trying to pull me back to protect me. Do not compromise your position for a lost variable.
I am not letting you walk away, Vincent. I turned around, looking directly into his pale grey eyes, my voice dropping into an unyielding, passionate promise. You told me numbers don't lie. So let's look at the actual numbers. Think, Vincent. If someone overrode your terminal, they had to bypass the local proxy server. Where would the secondary hardware backup be stored? Vincent blinked, his sharp grey eyes suddenly widening behind his lenses as my chaotic energy forced his frozen, analytical brain back to life. A dangerous, brilliant spark returned to his face.
He shoved his glasses back up his nose.
The basement utility grid, the physical network switches keep an automated analog log of every physical MAC address connected to the floor routers at that exact minute. Can you extract the data? I asked, a huge, triumphant grin breaking through my anger. Vincent's posture went perfectly straight, his voice returning to its confident, deep baritone. If I wrote the core firewall protocols for this entire building, Tristan,
I know exactly where the backdoor logs are stored. It takes precisely 8 minutes to print.
To do it, I cheered. Mr. Vice President, give us 10 minutes. If we don't bring back the real thief, you can fire us both. Scene 10. The optimized overload. 4:50 p.m. 10 minutes before the end of the business day. Vincent's fingers were flying across his terminal screen in the server room with a ferocious, blinding, and terrifying speed. The mechanical clicking of the keys sounded like an upbeat battle rhythm. I stood right behind him, guarding the door, watching the progress bar on his screen hit 80%, 90%, 100%. Beep. The local laser printer whirred to life, spitting out the single sheet of paper. Vincent snatched it, his eyes scanning the analog timestamps with mathematical precision. Got you, Vincent murmured, a cold, victorious smirk crossing his handsome face. We marched back into the executive boardroom, where Marcus and the VP were waiting. I slammed the fresh paper directly over Marcus's forged legal folders. Here is the physical network router log from Tuesday evening, sir, I announced, using my maximum sales charisma to deliver the final blow. The data transfer didn't come from Vincent's terminal.
It came from a hidden Wi-Fi dongle physically plugged into the router's switch in the basement, and the device's registration ID belongs to Marcus from legal.
Marcus turned as pale as a ghost, stumbling backward as the VP snatched the paper, his eyes widening in pure rage. Marcus, your own device ID, security. Escort this man out of the building. Call the authorities. As Marcus was dragged out of the room screaming, the VP looked at the two of us, letting out a long sigh of relief. An immaculate piece of investigation, gentlemen.
The Apex Global contract stands, and the chairman's bonus belongs entirely to the two of you as a team.
Congratulations. I let out a loud, wild scream of pure joy, leaping into the air, completely forgetting that we were in a professional environment. I lunged at Vincent, wrapping my arms tightly around his neck. To my absolute shock, the Ice King didn't pull away. He caught me by the waist, lifting me slightly off the ground, a soft, beautiful laugh escaping his lips. Scene 11. The perfect synchronization. 00 p.m. The sales floor was empty. The lights were dimmed, casting long, warm shadows across the polished glass partitions. I was sitting on the edge of my desk, my blonde hair messy, my tie completely discarded. Vincent walked over from his cubicle, smoothly holding 2 cups of fresh espresso. He had taken off his black-rimmed glasses, placing them neatly on my desk, exposing the raw, intense depth of his gray eyes. The calculations are complete, Tristan, Vincent murmured softly, setting the cups down and stopping just an inch away from me. His voice was a deep, velvet melody that sent a sudden, happy thrill straight down my spine. Our combined sales revenue for this quarter represents a 300% increase in efficiency. As a team, our compatibility index is mathematically perfect. Oh, really? Is it your professional advice, Senior Executive Gale? I teased, my blue eyes bright with an intense, happy warmth as I reached out, my fingers gently tangling in his dark hair. No, Vincent whispered, stepping even closer until our chests were completely touching.
He reached around my waist, his strong, warm hands pulling me securely into his firm embrace.
This is my personal, unoptimized choice. He leaned down, his lips brushing against mine in a soft, agonizingly sweet preview before closing the final distance. The kiss was deep, passionate, and full of an absolute, unyielding devotion that sealed our timelines together forever. It wasn't about data anymore. It wasn't about the sales war or the hidden shields. We were blinded by a rival, but we ended up finding our perfect harmony. Scene 15. The compromised data. If these logs are correct, the firewall wasn't bypassed from the outside. It was unlocked from within our own department. I stood leaning over Vincent's shoulders, my hands gripping the edge of his mathematically organized desk. The office of Howard Innovations was completely empty, shrouded in the dark blue shadow of midnight. The only source of light was the cold, harsh glow of Vincent's terminal screen, which reflected sharply off his black-rimmed glasses. Vincent didn't answer immediately. His long, pale fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard with a terrifying, rhythmic speed, pulling up deep system access strings. His sharp jaw was tightly clenched, and his tailored 3-piece suit, even at 1 00 a.m. was immaculate, though he had loosened his dark tie by a single centimeter.
The encryption override occurred at exactly 6:14 p.m. Tristan, Vincent spoke, his smooth baritone dropping into a dangerously calm, low drone. Precisely 14 minutes after you and I left the building for our scheduled dinner.
The user profile utilized to access the Genesis Tech data vault belonged to the new variable.
Chase, I whispered, my blue eyes narrowing as my usual, hyperactive. Golden boy optimism completely vanished, replaced by a cold, protective instinct.
The new intern. I knew his flirtatious admiration was a bit too perfect. He wasn't trying to charm me for a good evaluation. He was using me as a visual distraction to track my terminal access tokens. A highly effective, low-intelligence espionage strategy, Vincent countered smoothly, his grey eyes locking onto mine through his lenses. He reached out, his warm, strong hand briefly covering my trembling fingers on the desk, squeezing them with absolute reassurance. He underestimated my local security nodes. The moment he cloned your security key, an automated ghost mirror drive cloned his entire network traffic. Can we bring this to the vice president tomorrow? I asked, my heart doing a wild, anxious flip. The VP is currently at a technology summit in Frankfurt. He is unreachable for the next 48 hours, Vincent sighed, pulling off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. Without his lenses, his sharp, sculpted face looked exhausted, carrying the heavy burden of his past betrayal. If Chase realizes we are monitoring him, he will delete the remote backup, and Genesis Tech will launch their copied software infrastructure on Friday morning. Howard Innovations will lose its market monopoly before the quarterly review. I leaned down closer, my face inches from his, looking directly into his vulnerable grey eyes. Then we don't wait for the VP, Vincent. We deploy survival strategy number 3. When the enemy thinks they have the data, you change the parameters of the game. Vincent stared at me, a rare, breathtakingly beautiful smirk slowly breaking through his cold exterior. You truly are a chaotic asset, Tristan. What is your spontaneous vision? We let Chase think he won. I smiled, a dangerous spark igniting in my eyes. Tomorrow morning, I will take him out to an exclusive client lunch to keep him away from the office. While I'm busy keeping his eyes on me, you use his backdoors to rewrite the stolen software architecture. When Genesis Tech tries to launch it on Friday, they won't open a multi-million-dollar server. They'll open a digital dead end. Vincent's gaze intensified, his hand sliding up my wrist, his thumb resting over my racing pulse point. The romantic tension in the dark office was sudden and heavy. Playing the distraction role with an intern who has designs on you represents an unacceptable risk index, Tristan. I do not approve of him standing within your personal space. He's an intern, Vincent. And I am the best closer in this city, I whispered, leaning in until our breaths mingled in the quiet dark. Besides, my compatibility index is already permanently locked to a certain human refrigerator. Nobody else stands a chance. Vincent let out a low, soft chuckle, a sound that completely melted my heart. Before pulling me down by my shirt collar, his lips meeting mine in a deep, passionate midnight kiss that sealed our secret operational pact. Scene 16. The distraction protocol. I have to admit, Mr. Burke, I was incredibly surprised when you invited me to a private lunch at the Sterling Bistro. Chase Henderson beamed, leaning across the white tablecloth with a radiant, intensely confident grin. He had discarded his intern badge, his dark blonde hair perfectly rumpled, his hazel eyes locking onto mine with undisguised flirtation. Most senior executives keep their distance, but you're just as approachable as you are handsome. Call me Tristan, Chase. I smiled smoothly, utilizing my maximum golden boy charm. I swirled the white wine in my glass, keeping my blue eyes bright and fully engaged, though my brain was counting down every single second on the restaurant's wall clock. 1:15 p.m. Vincent had been inside the core server room for exactly 45 minutes.
Tristan then, Chase murmured, his voice dropping into a lower, suggestive pitch.
He reached his large hand across the table, his fingers casually creeping toward mine, attempting to brush against my knuckles. You know, the rumors on the sales floor say you're completely untouchable. They say your rival, Vincent Gale, has some kind of icy hold over you. But looking at you now, I think you just haven't met someone who knows how to properly appreciate your energy. Internal monologue. Wow. The arrogance on this kid is unbelievable. He really thinks his cheap charm can bypass my defenses while he sells our company out to Genesis Tech. Just smile, Tristan. Keep his hands busy so he doesn't check his phone.
Vincent is just highly focused on structured chase. I laughed off, smoothly withdrawing my hand to pick up my wine glass, blocking his advance with absolute professional grace. He thinks everything can be solved with a spreadsheet,
but I prefer a more personal connection. Tell me more about your work with the European branch. I heard your data migration speeds were exceptionally fast. Chase's eyes flashed with a subtle hint of triumph, thinking he had completely fooled me. Oh, I can move data faster than anyone in this building, Tristan. In fact, by the time this quarter ends, I think I'll be running this entire department. With you right by my side, of course. Chase's smile suddenly froze. He pulled his phone from his blazer pocket, his eyes scanning the screen. My heart slammed violently against my ribs. Did Vincent get caught? Did the server firewall alert him? I watched as Chase's hazel eyes widened in confusion, then absolute panic. The confident, flirtatious intern look vanished instantly, his face turning an ashen pale. He began frantically typing on his screen, his knuckles turning white.
This is statistically impossible.
The source directories are shifting. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs, my friendly smile transforming into a cold, victorious smirk that cut through his panic. Is there an error in your data traffic, Intern Henderson? I asked, my voice dropping its playful edge, carrying the absolute weight of a top-tier closer who had just finalized a trap. Perhaps your corporate tokens are experiencing a synchronization error. You see, Vincent Gale didn't just build our firewall. He wrote the original security code for the entire Genesis Tech database 3 years ago before he left them. You didn't steal our software, Chase. You just gave Vincent a direct backdoor to download your entire competitor's legal strategy. Chase gaped at me in sheer, unmitigated horror, his phone almost slipping from his trembling fingers. You knew? The entire lunch. It was a setup? Consider it your final performance evaluation. I smiled, standing up and tossing $100 bill onto the table to cover the check. Pack your bags, Chase. Char is waiting for you in room B. And try not to sob on your way out. It affects our department's morale. Scene 17. The final audit. The Friday morning quarterly review was a battlefield. A vice president sat at the head of the long table, surrounded by the entire board of directors. On the left side sat the representatives of Genesis Tech, flanked by their expensive defense lawyers. On the right side sat Vincent and I, standing back to back like two apex predators protecting their territory.
The evidence submitted by Genesis Tech claims that Howard Innovations utilized a hostile data siphon to compromise their intellectual property. The VP announced, his expression grim as he looked at the files. They are demanding a full suspension of our decentralized cloud project and a mandatory $10 million penalty settlement.
The lead lawyer from Genesis Tech stood up, adjusting his tie with an arrogant sneer. The digital footprint bears the encrypted signature of your top senior executives. Your startup is a fraud, Mr. Vice President. We will destroy your market valuation by noon unless you sign this settlement. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck, but I didn't flinch. I looked across the glass table at Vincent. Vincent slowly stood up from his chair, his tall frame looming over the entire boardroom. He reached down with long, pale fingers, calmly taking off his black-rimmed glasses and placing them neatly on the table. Without his armor, his pale grey eyes were flashing with an absolute, unyielding authority that silenced the room. He pulled the silver vintage pocket watch from his vest, placing it gently next to his glasses. The digital footprint you are referencing is a secondary variable, Vincent spoke, his smooth baritone voice carrying a terrifying, clinical stillness that echoed off the glass walls. If you analyze the analog network switches from the physical server core in Frankfurt, which my advisor and I extracted yesterday evening, the timestamps prove a 48-hour structural mismatch. He hit a button on his tablet, projecting a massive, brilliant holographic data chart into the air above the boardroom table.
Genesis Tech did not create this software architecture, Vincent declared, his eyes piercing right through the opposing legal team. Your firm manually forged the encryption tokens using a compromised intern profile within our department.
The files you downloaded yesterday were a localized digital dead-end containing a dormant decryption worm. At exactly 8:00 a.m. this morning, that worm activated, permanently locking Genesis Tech's primary source code. You do not have a lawsuit. You have a bankrupt infrastructure. The Genesis Tech lawyers went completely pale, the files slipping from their fingers as their phones began to vibrate furiously with panicked alerts from their corporate headquarters. An immaculate optimization of resources, Vincent. I smiled, stepping forward to deliver the final sales closer speech to the board of directors. Mr. Vice President, Howard Innovations hasn't just protected its assets. We have completely neutralized our competitor. The decentralized cloud project is ready for launch. And the chairman's bonus belongs entirely to the two of us as a team. The VP stared at the holographic charts in absolute awe, a wide, triumphant grin breaking through his serious face. He slammed his fist onto the table. The settlement is rejected. Genesis Tech, get out of my building before I call the Federal Fraud Bureau. Tristan, Vincent, you two just saved this entire conglomerate. As the opposing team scrambled out of the boardroom in sheer panic, the entire room erupted into wild applause from the board members. I turned around, my blue eyes bright with pure, ecstatic joy. I didn't care about the corporate protocol anymore. I lunged across the space, wrapping my arms tightly around Vincent's neck. Vincent caught me securely by my waist, lifting me slightly off the ground right in front of the board directors, a rare, radiant, and incredibly beautiful human smile finally breaking through his stone mask as he held me close against his chest. Scene 18. The lifetime compatibility. 8:00 p.m. The high-energy sales floor was completely empty. The harsh fluorescent lights were turned off, leaving the room illuminated only by the warm, amber glow of the city lights streaming through the giant panoramic windows. I was sitting on the edge of my desk, my blonde hair slightly messy, my blue button-down shirt unbuttoned at the collar, my tie discarded onto a stack of signed contracts. Vincent walked over from his cubicle, smoothly holding 2 cups of fresh mint-infused espresso. He had left his jacket and glasses behind, his black silk vest tightly fitting his broad shoulders. The final metrics have been logged, Tristan, Vincent murmured softly, setting the cups down and stopping just 2 inches away from me. His gray eyes were filled with an intense, burning warmth that made my stomach feel entirely too light. The market valuation of Howard Innovations has increased by 34% this afternoon. As a closing team, our synchronization index is officially uncalculable. Is that your official administrative evaluation, Senior Executive Gale? I teased, a soft, happy laugh escaping my lips as I reached out, my fingers gently tangling in his dark hair, pulling him closer. No, Vincent whispered, his strong, warm hands sliding around my waist, pulling me securely into his firm, unyielding embrace until our chests were perfectly touching. This is an absolute unarchived commitment. The office war is permanently over, Tristan. I don't want a rival anymore. I just want to spend the rest of my timeline with you. Approved without any modifications, I whispered, my eyes fluttering shut as he leaned down, his lips melting into mine in a passionate, deep, and lingering kiss that sealed our futures together forever. The spreadsheets were gone, the hidden shields were shattered, and the cold Ice King had finally found his perfect, chaotic harmony.